Our next speaker is Agne NARUS YTE, who is a critic, curator, and researcher interested in contemporary photography and its links with philosophy, history, and art. And the title of her paper is Post-Art Photoperformances, Material for Research or a Work of Art. Please welcome.
Well, my interest in this group and also in performative art, in this avant-garde movement, started with a discovery of a collection of photographs, because my field is photography, and of course I'm most interested in photographs. And a few years ago, Gintaras Zinkevic just discovered in his cupboard a collection of 156 photographs, which he thought were lost. And it was a collection compiled by the group Post-Ars to represent themselves to the world in 1991. It represented their performances from 3 years, 89 to 91. And it also included texts written by them in English. They wrote maybe in Lithuanian, but they got them translated. Actually, now I translated them back into Lithuanian myself, because Lithuanian versions were lost. And actually, my presentation relates to quite a few presentations yesterday and today. And all this concept of lost 80s, broken 80s, it's here in this project as well. These people were disconnected from the West and really wanted to be the West. They were interested in Western art as much as they could get it, but they knew very little of it. At least that's what they tell me. They didn't know about installation art or performance, very little about performance art or land art, and they thought they invented all these things. Yes, and actually it's by this group that these terms were used for the first time in Lithuania, as far as I know. Now, this photograph itself is, this montage is actually ironic, an ironic comment about the group itself, because the photographer Zinkevic, he's the photographer, he made them all look equal, while they are not. He's, for example, Zinkevic is a very tall guy, nearly 2 meters tall, and others are smaller, of different sizes, and also of different generations, actually, because when they became a group, Robertas Antinis, who is on the left, Robertas Antinis was a sculptor, already well-known sculptor, and he was already in his 40s, while Zinkevic was just over 20 years old. Very young, and the other two in between. What connected them was not only the wish to reform Lithuanian art and go to the West, but also the fact that none of them studied in the State Institute of Art. Yes, 2 of them had art education. Antinis, whose father, sculptor Robertas Antinis, was born in Latvia, attended Riga Technological School of Art, and Aleksas Andrius studied in Šiauliai. Lukenskas was a musician, studied in Conservatory of Music in Vilnius, and Gintaras Zinkevic studied photography in Technological Institute in Vilnius, and he also came from the background of amateur filmmaking, and he had done lots in it. The reason I'm mentioning this is because they all felt kind of outsiders in Lithuanian art world from the very beginning. And also Lukenskas and Zinkevic, the musician and the filmmaker, brought their understanding of how to create art together. Because artists are usually individualists. They tend to just focus on their own work, and only from music and from cinema comes this idea that artists' ideas could be thrown together into one pool and developed into something different. No, wrong button. And they have created lots of works, and the collection of photographs I will talk about is only a small part of their output. But here I'm showing their most successful and famous work of land art, which was their participation in the European Biennale in Germany, Niederlausitz, in '93, where they got Grand Prix with another artist from Germany. And they made this, it was an abandoned quarry of coal mines, huge areas which Germans wanted to redevelop, and it was a second biennial. And artists created all sorts of projects, and this one consisted of railway sleepers placed into such a way as to form the staves. It's actually the lines on which musical scores are written, and it really captured visitors' imaginations because everybody commented. I read German reviews where they commented that, oh, how beautiful the grass, the clouds, the trees, and the people who come among those staves, they become notes and we all create music. So this musical part is very important in the group post-ars. And now here is already a bit of collection. I included the texts. You can read them. I won't repeat them. They are a kind of poetic comments, poetic reflections on what is represented in performances. And actually, what made me start researching this collection as well as the group was the fact that these photographs were consistently presented as documentation of performances, which is very common in art history, not only in Lithuania but in the West. But this concept is changing. Concept of photography, concept of recording of performances. And I saw lots of interesting possibilities in interpretation of this collection of post-ars. Now, talking about performances, of course we have a theory of performance which says that performance only happens at nunc now with bodies present here, the bodies of the performers, of the viewers, and that everything disappears when they finish the performance. Actually, German theorist Erika Fischer-Lichte wrote a very impressive book, The Aesthetics of Performance, in the previous decade, and it became very influential, and she raised these ideas. And also she said that a performance cannot show preconceived meaning. The meaning is emerging during the performance, and actually she didn't talk about recording them, because in art history, recording performances by photography or cinema this consideration had stopped previously at the book by Peggy Phelan, who said that the performance actually is made of this unknown. It wants to recede into nothing. It wants to disappear. I just want to quote her statement, which concerns recording by photography. Without a copy, live performance plunges into visibility. in a maniacally charged present and disappears into memory, into the realm of invisibility and the unconscious, where it eludes regulation and control. For the performance, it's very important to elude regulation and control, and when the performance is recorded, it kind of comes back to this politics of control, and those people who are recorded there, they can be scrutinized, controlled, as we had lots of cases of photography being used in such situations. Our history is full of such stories. We will show another part of this same performance. But in case of post-ars, what complicates this recording of performance is that Zinkevic was part of the group. And actually, this discussion of if are these photographs documents or art, documentation of performances or actual works of art, relates to another question: is Zinkevic part of the group or not? Because there were various presentations of the group with his name or without his name. But when I talk to the artists, and especially of course to him, they feel they all are a group, and the photographer was included in the group, even though there are many documents showing, for example, manifestos written by the group without his name. And it's a constant, it was a constant problem for these 25 years in their work. And for example, this performance is presented as performance by Andriushkevičius and Lukenskas, and Zinkevičius is in best cases written only as a photographer. But when I talk to them, the story is like that. They were traveling to do a completely different performance, to float some sheets of paper, I think, on water, but they sank and performance didn't happen. And then why to waste time when they traveled together? So Zinkevic says he had this idea, so take this, he had by accident in his car this hammer, and take this and do something with it, and he photographed it, and here is the performance. Of course, it's his memory, it might be also that others contested, and there are lots of, they actually argue between themselves about lots of issues related to this collection. But here it is, he is a member of the group, and that's what happens, that ideas merge and works of art are created, and in this case, and in the case of this collection, actually photographs were intended as a result. And concerning photographs as a result of performance and also recording performance was really well summed up in a grand exhibition in Tate Modern this year. There is a catalog, we can look at everything, and it looked at photography as performance in all guises. Actually, now there is a kind of this idea rising that photography is performative from the start. Even Roland Barthes is evoked when he said that in Camera Lucida that when a simple portrait is photographed, there are 4 registers working. When the photographer, when the person who is photographed thinks about who I think I am, then he thinks who I want others to think I am. Then he thinks about who the photographer sees in himself and who he uses to create his art. So these are 4 registers, but I think they even could be more complicated into more registers. And actually every portrait photograph is becoming a performance when you think like that. And this exhibition showed portraits made by Nadar in the 19th century, also as a case of performance, which is especially evident when you show different shots showing the same person, showing a different face, different movement. And yesterday we saw an excellent presentation where this idea was further developed. And of course, there were performances from the 70s and 80s documented by photographers in this exhibition. Of course, there was Cindy Sherman, whose all work is a performance, and other photographers like that. And one pivotal case is Yves Klein, with his performances, who were extensively photographed by a couple of photographers, Harry Schunk and Janos Kender. They specialized in photographing performance and were trying to solve this case, because for photographers it's a complicated matter. When you see something that is unrehearsed and is happening just now, how to photograph it so that it could be understood by others who haven't seen the performance, actually. And Zinkevic was solving the same problem on his own, which will become visible later how he solved it. And actually, photographs by Schunk and Kender are really different from other performance photographs, because you really can understand what's going on. In many other cases, photographs of performances tend to be blurred and they just show some fragment, and actually they work more like fetishes of what happened, of the legend of those artists who are performing, rather than telling what happened in performance as a narrative which proceeds through transformations from one stage into a new stage. And the reason I'm showing this photograph on the right, it's actually also one of very famous turning points, because here Yves Klein, together with his photographers, they are making a joke on photography of decisive moment. And we come here to the problem of time, because traditional photography of decisive moment, as created by Cartier-Bresson, focused on a photograph as a really small slice of time where accidental coincidences happen. They happen without the photographer's intervention. They happen in reality itself, and it would be best if reality didn't realize that it was observed by a photographer. And also they form into a meaningful statement. The reality itself forms into a meaningful statement. And of course, this decisive moment has in itself the past and the future, but it's already past and the future of the imagination. And Yves Klein constructed this ironic photograph, which is like a decisive moment, but if we think of it in those terms, we would have to think that he died after that, which of course didn't happen, because it's a manipulated photograph. Strong men were holding some, I don't know what it's called in English, but he fell into that and everything was edited out. So the reason I'm telling about this, that the view how photography was understood changed quite long ago. It was understood as something that a performance could construct on purpose. Performance had the photograph in mind, and it's a different kind of performance as well as a different kind of photograph. And you cannot call it a document of performance, because it was intended as such and not differently. And actually now, it's another image from that exhibition, but I just included this one. I was really impressed by Robertas Antinis, who was also specializing in photographing performances. There were many more of them. And I want to show also a photograph by Jeff Wall. Katrina and Laila were talking yesterday about tableau vivant, and it's one of them, and it's already a recent photograph, 2004 and 5, and it reflects also this changed attitude towards the moment recorded in photographs. This one shows the nothing moment of everyday life. It's nothing happening here. But the way Jeff Wall works, he worked several months to create this tableau vivant. The girls had to live in this flat, which was also searched very carefully in order to find the window with a view, that particular view. And they had to become natural in these surroundings in order to present what is also kind of unpresentable, our everyday lives, moments that pass unregistered. And actually, this photograph is also very much a performance with the end result of photograph, although he is not thinking about it as such. It's just now with this performative turn, all photographs seem to be included into this. And I think it's also related to the fact that the attitude towards photography is changing. Just recently was a book by Ariela Azoulay published where she says that every photograph is actually an event, which includes the way it was made, the function it was intended to, also this collaboration between photographer and reality that was photographed, and then the way it will be used, it will be shown or hidden, rediscovered, and so on. So I just wanted to emphasize that the attitude towards photography is changing as well, and that's why we have to reconsider such collections like the postcards. This one I deleted, but it jumped out, I don't know why. Sorry. I just realized I can't comment on it. And now I'm moving to the collection and trying to show what everything means in it in terms of document, art, and performance. So here is Andrius. He is one of his ideas about how image and gesture and also sign, written sign, he's very interested in language, in letters, how they can be connected in a photograph. They were doing performance. As you can see here, it's part of this collection of images. Two guys are holding and the photographer photographing, and then we get an ideogram, a new meaning, a symbol. And there are two more images of this staged and denied landscape at the same time. It's more like Derrida deconstruction visually. And here, for example, another of Andrius Kevic's ideas, general, very important ideas, is the line itself, the performance of making lines in the field. And they are making the staves, again, for musical scores. And the line for him is something where other dimensions disappear. Just time and the body is kind of transformed into this moving line. It's his important idea. And actually the work in Germany, the land work which I showed, also was his idea developed by the group. So again, the work of group is very important here. Another of his ideas, just using ordinary objects to create a line in the forest. It's just how they're called, colanders, ladles with the holes to stick something. And another important idea is, for example, printing. He likes to use printed matter, which for him represents endless repetition of culture, that culture repeats itself constantly. And of course, when it is photographed, all this repetition is made even more sinister, like here as well. And actually, they have these post-arts artists. They really create huge, massive imagery of land art by putting postcards of works of art. So it's also a comment about work of art as well. cultural bodies, just work with trees, but I'm afraid I'm running out of time, so I'll move a bit faster without commenting on each of them. Yes. And I want to move to Antinis. He is a sculptor, and one of his main ideas is copulus or connections. It's his own translation, copulus. He chose that word. And what I want to emphasize here, that this performance, differently from Andriuškevičius when he was walking the lines in the landscape, like Richard Long, by the way, here the performance didn't take in front of another audience other than photographer. And he climbed over to the fireman's tower near a quarry, and he directed the artist what to do in order to get the image. So it's a different case when not the artist's body so much creates the end result, but the photographer's directing gaze from above, which creates the performance as an image. These are the other images from the same performance. Actually, I'm not showing all the series, I'm cutting them into smaller chunks. Here is another performance by Antinis. He has this idea of blindness and focusing on your other perceptions and feelings and perceiving existence. And also he creates himself as a sculptor, very much in line with Bruce Nauman and his fountain, where also ephemeral materials. Bruce Nauman uses water and his body, Antinis uses body and cotton wool. And they turned themselves into sculptures, but also this performance took place only for the camera. There was nothing else. It didn't exist as something different, just for the camera, and we see the transformation. A plane, which he problematizes a plane as a sculptor. He deviated from three-dimensional sculpture to discover the volume of the plane. And it's one of his performances, which is also transforming. Or touching the plane with his, I asked what material was there. It was sour cream, so it was quite tasty. And this is also a performance which just took place for the camera, so it's generally a photo performance. And I like particularly this one because it's very bizarre. It's like a crucifix, but upside down on the one hand. On the other hand, he's melting. And actually this melting is taking place by handing pieces of cotton wool above the body. There is a gap between the cotton wool and the body, and he's melting only in this cotton wool, but actually also he's melting for the photograph in photographic materials, which don't stop distinguishing between the drawing of the body and this cotton wool. And another one is just a little bit of it, where Antinis experiences the hill, and the host left after his performance to all Lithuanians, of course, must remind Čiurlionis. And Čiurlionis was undeclared, but an important influence on that performance, and I was thinking about your three temporalities. Through Čiurlionis, this pre-Soviet time temporality existed in Passar's performances, and here is one of the images, in the kind of also ironic way. And here Česlovas Lukenskas, the third artist, he is the one who likes to burn everything, and he destroyed his works which were rejected by official art, and his performances are really something that happens very quickly, and as Zinkevic told me, you have to really quickly photograph, and it's really, really already more like documentation. Here we see his very important idea of a star, where he commented on, of course, Soviet symbols, and also how people put different garments on themselves, and I mean the same people who proclaimed communism, later nationalism, and they were just changing shapes. And the seed. This seed is a very important transformative idea related to this wish to regenerate, to grow new human beings from the land, and Lukenskas did all kinds of seeds used in his installations, and here is doing a performance, rolling people into some materials in order to replant them and grow. I will, yes, so this one I won't comment, I want to show a little bit of this. Moving traveling quadrangles is also a performance which is directed by photographer's gaze. And here on this right photograph there are 3 post-ars artists lying like stars on these quadrangles. And thrown out man. I particularly like the other photos where Lukenskas is of course showing himself as a man thrown out of society, but in photographic terms it's very important to make visible all the surroundings, which are, for example, also the architecture of Soviet times, and difficult to show the surroundings as well as this figure, and lots of work included in it, in developing to make all these parts visible. And like here also, notice he's distant, not thrown out somewhere here where he would be more easily visible, but he should disappear in the surroundings. And I will have to run really fast, but I want to show how this collection was shown in the numerous exhibitions. This is in Paris or Baltic. Posters were shown everywhere, and only the 3 artists were included as participants. Here we see epitaph by Robertas Antinis and the whole collection. Although the collection, I hope I have shown you how photography was important in creating it, but he wasn't considered as participating in the exhibition because that was shown usually as a documentation of performances, which I hope you saw that were intended as photographs in very many cases. So now I think this collection has to be reconsidered, and maybe I think it would be good to end here, because I could develop that, but it's enough for this point.